President Ashraf Ghani's short flight from Kabul to Kathmandu this morning, from the Karakoram Mountains to the Himalayas, is really emblematic of the long journey that he has taken from the Habibia School in Kabul in the 1950s, a school, incidentally, that India helped re-establish after the ouster of the Taliban in 2001, to Columbia University and the World Bank several decades later. He's home now, back in Kabul, hopefully for good. Certainly, that's not all. President Ghani's colorful past includes his candidature to succeed Kofi Annan as Secretary General of the United Nations in 2006, as well as head the World Bank in 2007. Instead, he ran the Institute for State Effectiveness, which examines the relationships between citizens, the state, and market forces. Today, 13 years after the fall of the Taliban, President Ghani presides over a national unity government that is beset with several challenges. Despite the combined expenditure of over $1 trillion by the US and its NATO allies, Afghanistan's poverty rate, about 36%, has remained about the same that it was 13 years ago. In addition, as US troops return home, the British, the Canadians, and those from several other countries have already left. There is the drugs mafia, the real estate mafia, as well as several warlords to deal with, not to mention an increasingly confident Taliban and perhaps even the Al-Qaeda. Once upon a time, not so long ago, Ashraf Ghani, the academic, wrote a book called Fixing Failed States. And yet, Afghanistan remains one of the most beautiful countries in the world, endowed with incredible natural beauty, as well as an immense wealth of natural resources. It has always stood at the crossroads of Asia, bridging north and south, east and west, with a rare dignity and aplomb you will find nowhere else in the world. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To speak of his country, Afghanistan, his region, South Asia, and the world, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to present to you the President of Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai. Your Excellency, I would like you to request you to come on stage and deliver the keynote address of India Today's first ever roundtable on South Asia. Would you like to speak from here?
Yes. Yes, fine. Good afternoon. Thank you for that very generous introduction, Ms. Malhotra. It's a pleasure to be back in Kathmandu. It's a city I know well, and it's a country where I've had the pleasure of being many times. What I'd like to talk about is to frame the advantages of backwardness. In history, there are rare moments where agency, thought, ideas, strategy can overcome structure, space, geography, and the weight of the past. South Asia is a region where we are on the one hand blessed with the weight of very important ideas, noble ideas. But on the other hand, it's a region that 70 years after partition still has not overcome the sense of the past. If we are to have the opportunity and the imagination to grasp the openness of today, we must be willing to overcome the past. And requiring the past requires that we grasp openness, backwardness as a process, understand its underlying causes, and not just deal with replication, repetition, or planning, but a new sense of design, a new sense that we can reframe the problems. In this moment, in order to allow for conversation, I will not focus on Afghanistan, I'll focus in general. What does it mean to be backward? It's a condition when poverty and inequality could be solved, but aren't. Afghanistan is a backward country. 36% of our population lives below poverty that no human being could endure or should endure. Backwardness is violence. As I was preparing for this talk, my young children in Paktika were blown up in a soccer field. I had to go straight from writing to the military hospital, where I received bodies of 18 children wounded in various ways, and one of whom died on the flight. That night, our trauma unit performed 33 operations. Every day in South Asia, we deal with one or another form of violence. Violence against women, violence against children, violence against the disabled. But the greatest violence is against the poor. Despite our phenomenal growth in this region, we are still home to the worst form of poverty imaginable. And that's not tolerable. South Asia is also the least integrated region on Earth. We trade more with every other region of the Earth than with ourselves. But backwardness is also a global condition. Inequality now has become spatial. Where one is born largely is determined one's life chances. And within the countries, spatial differences, again, are a fundamental driver of inequality. And because of it, despite the demonstration that wealth creation has no limit, we persist on reproducing poverty and inequality on a global scale. And the fundamental contradiction of our global moment is that on the one hand, the last phase of globalization, because we have had three phases of globalization. Globalization 1.0, that was centered on colonialism. In Asia, roughly from 1850 to 1914. In Asia was forced into structural backwardness. Globalization 2.0 from 1980 to 2005, which was the heyday of liberal openness with the states retreating to the background. But during the second moment, Asia produced its middle classes. Now both China and India, thanks to their phenomenal growth, have changed for the first time since 1800 the balance of global inequality. Post-2008, we're dealing with a different world. Prior to 2008, the prevalent notion was that the market knew best, the head in hand could not be questioned. After 2008, we are finding a new balance between the market and the state. But more importantly than anything else, we are finding a new balance with citizens. In South Asia, in this regard, is a beacon of hope. All across South Asia, citizens' movements are changing history. The other side, however, is the state systems are under attack by violence in ideology. And the state systems are being judged by their weakest points, not by their strongest. And we in Afghanistan know all too well what it is like to become the subject of a series of confluences that daily deprive us of what is normal. What is normal is not normal for us. What is normal is to walk to school or ride a bike and think, as a young person, and think that you can return home. 2 days ago, I had to greet these bodies. The week before that, I had to deal with a young woman, fourth year of college, who was again blown up by a suicide bomber. This sense of abnormality is what we need to deal with as our first challenge. Because as long as the state system in South Asia does not focus on the fundamental issue of peace and security for our citizens, pejoratively called the ordinary people, they are the extraordinary heroes, and I hope that we can all understand them. And because of it, citizens' movement are rejecting traditional elite bargains and are demanding a space at the table. If we are going to seize this moment, I'll just articulate quickly two main propositions, so then we can have time for question. How should we focus on regional integration? The first is, if you look into the World Economic Forum's index, economic index, or competitiveness index, you see on one column it says factor, productivity, then it's transition, then it's efficiency, then it's innovation. These are, they call them stages, but they're not stages because they exist simultaneously. What is the condition of all of South Asian states? Factor-driven production. Not a single state in South Asia or country in South Asia is at the level of efficiency or at the level of innovation. And this is where we both see our inheritance and yet the possibility. India's phenomenal growth has lifted all of South Asia and opened up the possibility. But enormous amount remains to get to the level of either China, to the type of strategies of China, or that of Singapore. And here we come to the limitations of the space. You know, our region is such that you could have breakfast in Delhi, lunch in Lahore, dinner in Kabul, and be next day in Dushanbe or Tashkent, all by road. But can you imagine how many obstacles there are? How many border points you need to cross, how many papers you need to fill, how many farms you must contend. Say, take any direction of movement. Movement of people, movement of goods. They are all constrained. Where we have freedom, of course, is in movement of ideas. And that means all of us can watch Bollywood. But even in movement of ideas, the nature of linkages is not focused on fundamental debates. If you look at European integration, networks, political party networks that were cross-national and transatlantic networks were important to this. Here we still have incipient movement, but not fundamental shift. Because of it, The key in the future lies in market integration and prosperity. There's an immense room for enhancing market integration. In here, we need to come to two propositions. The market is underdeveloped. There is an enormous range of market instruments that can be put to work without embracing market fundamentalism. Second, that the market is not just national, but regional. And third, that there is no contradiction between competing at the global stage and enhancing regional economic integration. The European Union trades much more since its formation within and with the rest of the world without facing this contradiction. But one of the most important parts of our disconnectivity is our infrastructure, both in terms of its effectiveness, but also in terms of its construction. If you look into the construction industry in all of South Asian countries during the last 20 years, but particularly during the last 10, you find enormous fluctuations. The construction industry and poverty may look very far apart, but are actually the most important set of relationships that we can find. Because it's the effectiveness of the construction industry that changes space, geography, and turns it into a space of connectivity. And it's here that a series of choices are open. And now I want to speak from the position of a country that is between and betwixt. Afghanistan is South Asian, Central Asian, small border with China, which makes us connected to East Asia, and of course, Middle Eastern. What is the choice? Energy is the driver, and South Asia is the largest deficit. There's 600 trillion cubic meters of gas in the Caspian. It's the largest supply of gas anywhere in the world. The smallest amount of trade between South Asia as a region is now with Central Asia. And this is the historic choice. Will South Asia, as its history of 10th to 19th century and earlier shows, connect to Central Asia through networks of energy, gas, oil, or will South Asia be forced to reintegrate with Southeast Asia and with use of old carbon fossil fuels? South Asia, Central Asia, today is a moment where it's awaiting connectivity. But when you look at Europe's energy plans, where do they focus? Central Asia. If you look at East Asia's focus, where do they focus? Central Asia. If you focus on Russia's energy systems, where do they focus? From South Asia, we've been dreaming, but not acting. And it is this historical opportunity that would turn a place like Afghanistan, that from every perspective has been marginal in the last 100 years, into a central space. We need a different way of proceeding, a different way of looking at things in order to make a difference. And that means, first of all, that we cannot do development in the usual manner. Project by project, small endeavor by small endeavor. If we want to realize this moment, then we need to think about region-wide projects. We need to mobilize financial resources very differently. We need to mobilize human resources different. All of the possibilities exist. What is critical is an approach that can stitch the existing elements into a system. I hope that we have this possibility and that we would be able to move from type of politics and type of ideas that were based on command and control to collaboration and communication. Sadi, one of our poets, said, "Deep in the sea are riches beyond compare, but if you seek safety, it is on the shore." I lead a landlocked nation, but Afghanistan will be finding its future in that sea. Thank you.